For your assignment today, you're going to go ahead and answer the questions on page 215, 217, and 218. There are a couple of things a couple of snags you might run into, so I want to give you a heads up. In question 3 here on page, on question 3 on page, see if I can undo that. There we go. Question 3 on page 215. They ask you what are the patterns in these special products, and all they're asking for is for you to multiply them out and then box your answer. So multiply a plus b times a minus b, get an answer. And by the way, for those, I did show you guys how to do this with algebra tiles, but let me remind you how to do it with something called FOIL. FOIL means just multiply the first two things, then the outer two things, then the inner two things, then the last two things. So if we have something like x minus 3 times x plus 8, let's say, x times x are the first two things, so that would get me x squared. The outer two things are x times 8, so plus 8x. The inner two things are negative 3 times x, so that's negative 3x. And then the last two things are negative 3 times 8, so that's negative 24. And then you combine together the like terms, the x's. In this case, we would get x squared plus 5x minus 24, and you would box that. There we go. Now, also, I would love it if you use the area model for multiplying these guys. You don't have to use algebra tiles, but you could. But you could also use this sort of box method where you do something like this. You make a box, and in your box, on this side of the box, you put x and negative 3, and then on the top x and 8, and then this is a good way to multiply polynomials and find the special products of polynomials. X times x is x squared, 8 times x is 8x, x times negative 3, negative 3x, 8 times negative 3, negative 24. And we'll actually use this methodology in order to factor polynomials when we want to break up the product. So anyways, whatever technique you want to use, algebra tiles or this area model, this is known as the area model, or FOIL, this will work, the algebra tiles will work. You're going to do that with a plus b times a minus b, a plus b times a plus b, and a minus b times a minus b. Okay, so there's that. Let's see here. I also want to try something else. All the problems on page 217 are pretty straightforward, but on 218 you'll find some trickiness. Like you might have this 1/4 b plus 1 times 1/4 b minus 1, and maybe some of you guys will need a little refresher on how to multiply and add fractions. Look at this one, look at 15. 1/2 c plus 1/3 times 1/2 c minus 1/3. I can give you guys a little example of how to do something like that. Let's try something like maybe 2/3 x minus 1/4, just for fun, and we'll multiply that times 2/3 x plus 1/4, and let's see how that comes out. So that'll be 2/3 times 2/3 is 4/9 x squared. And then negative 1/4 times 2/3 x and positive 1/4 times 2/3 x, those guys are going to cancel, so I'm not even going to write them out. But negative 1/4 times positive 1/4 is going to be negative 1/16. So problems like 15 look a little tricky, but they're not quite as bad as they look. Also, you might freak out when you get to 19 through 24, but don't freak out. Again, let me give you some idea of what you can do with these. So again, this example was something like 15. This is like 15. There we go. Let me give you an example of something that is like 19. and then I'll let you try to use a similar idea for 20 through 24. With 18 times 22, they ask you to use special patterns to find the product. What they expect you to do is this. For 18, you would do something like 10 plus 8. That's what 18 is, right? And then 22 is something like 20 plus 2. And then you could go ahead and multiply these out. 10 times 20 is 200. And that's first times first, outer times outer. That'll be 20. 2 times 10. Inner times inner. 8 times 20 plus 160. And then last times last, 8 times 2 is 16. And then you can go ahead and add all those up. And I'd like you to try to do these problems without a calculator as much as possible. That's kind of the idea. I think that's it. I just wanted to give you some hints and some tips to make sure you would be successful in completing this assignment. After you've written out all the answers, in Google Classroom, I will have you take a photo of your work and upload all your work. Thank you for hanging out, and hopefully this is helpful. Remember, please contact me if you have any questions or any difficulty.